Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, December the 9th, 2024. So it's going to be a fairly brief video, and I'll start off by looking at what's happening this week. So astrologically, there are some things that are worthy of note, and I'll be just going through it in a sort of blow by blow kind of way. And having done that, I'm going to have Venus in Aquarius as my special topic. So Venus in Aquarius, well, Venus went into Aquarius at the end of last week, but it's at the beginning of the sign, and so I thought it might be a good idea to just consider what Venus in Aquarius means with a few examples of people with this placement. And finally, I want to look at the I Ching. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an I Ching for the week. And my I Ching for the week will have 4 sections: a general section, then I'm going to look at money, then career and business, and finally relationships. It'll be a fairly short video. So just the usual reminder before I get going that if you do happen to enjoy the video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed and you enjoy the video, I would be really, really happy if you were to subscribe. I'm kind of hoping to get to 9,000 subscribers by the end of the year, but I think that's looking unlikely. But so maybe I'm going to have to wait until January to hit the 9,000. Anyway, so let's look at what's happening this week. So here we have the positions of the planets. By the way, that planet top right, that is the planet Venus. And so the positions of the planets. Right, so the beginning of the week, you can see that week starts off, this is sort of the beginning of a week, Monday, if you're taking Monday as the beginning of a week at midnight, moon starts off in Pisces, and it's a last quarter moon. No, it's not. It's a first quarter moon. So we've got a first quarter moon. We had new moon, 1st of December, and so now around a week later, the new lunar cycle is starting to make itself felt. The moon is very visible unless you've got clouds, and of course at night. So we're beginning to see the first results of this first quarter moon, and then of course by the very end of a week we get a full moon, and that's something I will be talking about nearer the time. So as far as looking at things on a day by day basis, Wednesday the 11th we have Sun semi-square Venus. So there's the Sun, there's a Venus. They're already in semi-square at the moment, but because the Sun and Venus, from the Earth's point of view, are moving at roughly the same speed, that means the semi-square just really does drag on, but it does become exact on Wednesday. So in terms of what Sun semi-square Venus means, I suppose you could say that it may represent a degree of friction, perhaps interpersonal friction. The Sun is very much how we want to express ourselves. It's our self. Venus may be about how we relate, and there may be a bit of an issue here in terms of making our presence felt, but doing it in such a way that it doesn't upset anyone. And we do have Sun in Sagittarius, semi-square Venus in Aquarius. So there may be issues of excitement and detachment. It may be about, on one hand, wanting to do something that is exciting and forward-looking. But Venus in Aquarius is perhaps having second thoughts. The Sun is ruled by Jupiter in Sagittarius, and Venus is ruled by Aquarius. Venus is ruled by Saturn because Venus is in Aquarius. So there may be a little bit of discomfort in terms of how we relate to other people, but I wouldn't want to overstate the matter. You could argue that the semi-square is just an aspect. It's just a dynamic aspect, and so with the Sun and Venus making this dynamic aspect, it's not enough to do things on our own. It's not enough to just be ourselves. We do feel that we need to get some recognition. Now, Sun's semi-square Venus may also have to say something about aesthetics, and Venus is the planet of beauty and what things look like. And with the Sun semi-square Venus, it may be difficult to get it right. I don't know. It's sort of where I am in America, people do like their Christmas decorations, and Christmas decorations are a bit of a problem because those that do get involved in Christmas decorations, I think they very often don't get the aesthetics right. And you have these sort of blow-up Father Christmas chimneys that I see. I've seen several blow-up Father Christmas chimneys where you've got this chimney, and the Father Christmas comes up and down. I don't quite know how it works, but you get these. I don't know. There used to be a house that had its whole backyard covered with Father Christmas stuff, Father Christmas sleighs. On Halloween, they used to have an 8-foot black widow on their balcony, but I think that's changed. But there is an issue of aesthetics in Christmas decorations. It's very difficult, I would have thought, to adorn your house in this Christmassy kind of way with these sort of blow-up decorations, to do it tastefully. Maybe it's actually impossible to do it tastefully. And so I suppose if you're somewhere where people are obsessed by Christmas, I don't think people, in terms of what my memory is of the UK, I don't think people are so obsessed with Christmas decorations in the UK as they are in the United States. But it's just so easy to do it in a way that is just aesthetically rather unpleasing, I would have said. It's I don't know. That doesn't look good to me, but maybe I'm just being unnecessarily critical. But that underlies my point, though, that Sun semi-square Venus can be about getting the aesthetics wrong. You try hard to make something look good, but still maybe you've just tried too hard. Then on Thursday, we have got Venus opposition Mars and Sun semi-square, sesquiquadrate Mars. So you can actually see this at the beginning of a week. Venus at 2 Aquarius, Mars at 6 Leo. So those two planets are converging, and Venus opposition Mars, I will be talking a lot more about this aspect at the time, nearer the time. But with Venus opposition Mars, it is about attraction and it's about repulsion. That's what I say with Venus-Mars combinations. And I suppose it can be an aspect that is somewhat sexually charged, and people are trying to attract, but perhaps they're not always being successful about it. And, with Venus opposition Mars, you have Venus, this female planet, at odds with Mars, the male planet. They're in opposition with each other. And so that can indicate that there is a sort of a conflict between genders. I don't know, in some places it's going to be more difficult than in others. We've had all these issues in South Korea. I've been told apparently in South Korea there's a lot of conflict between genders. I don't know why. I've never been to South Korea, but the differences between genders may be very stark with Venus opposition Mars, and that's something I'll be considering later on. But we might just want to see Venus as a trigger, because on Thursday we have the Sun will be at around 21 Sagittarius, so the Sun will be sesquiquadrate Mars. And so Sun sesquiquadrate Mars, 135 degrees, can be a tense aspect. It can just be unpleasant, it can be violent, it can be about aggression. And Venus's role, well, Venus can just be a trigger. It may not matter the fact that it's Venus, it's just a planet which is piling on the pressure at this point at around 6 Leo. So 6 Leo is going to be a point which is strongly emphasized. And so, anyone who has something at 6 Leo really may feel the pressure. And I suppose when I'm looking at that day, I'll be considering people who comes to mind. I think Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has got his Venus around 6 at the end of, just before 6 Aquarius. I think it's 5 something Aquarius, but right at the end, very close to 6 Aquarius. Of course, the United States has its North Node at 6 degrees Leo, so the United States might be impacted by this, and there will be other people, and I will be looking at that in a few days' time. And Friday, we've got Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto. I think the Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto is an important aspect. On a positive note, Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto is about self-improvement. And because Jupiter and Pluto are quite slow-moving planets, I think we're going to be feeling this Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto all the time, and maybe you'll be more impacted by it if you've got a Jupiter Pluto aspect in your horoscope. I have got Jupiter opposition Pluto in my chart, and so maybe it'll affect me. I mean, it's not an exact Jupiter Pluto opposition, but I suppose it's my desire for self-improvement might be triggered. Although Jupiter Pluto sesquiquadrate can go too far, it can be about power and how one asserts one's power and wanting more power. So that is a possible manifestation of Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto. And then we move into the weekend. And on Sunday, 2 events coincide. And that means we have a full moon and we have Mercury going stationary direct. So I don't want to say too much about that because, that's really something I'll be talking about at the end of a week. Of course, full moons, the lunar cycle reaches its peak, and we have to consider how that impacts us. In many ways, full moons can often be about the truth, seeing things for what they really are, or something culminating. And then, of course, we've got Mercury stationary direct. So, by and large, Mercury stationary direct should be fortunate because things are returning to normal, at least in a Mercury sense. Though I'm slightly concerned about the fact that we've got a full moon and Mercury going stationary direct at the same time. So when you've got Mercury stationing, and whether it's direct or retrograde, in this case it's direct, when you've got a lunation and Mercury stationary direct, it can have an impact. It can sometimes have an impact on the markets. I'm must make it clear, I'm not making any financial advice here. It's just in the past, in my subjective view, maybe I've got this wrong, but I have noticed that when you do get a lunation and a Mercury station very close to one another, that can indicate market turbulence. So that is possible, but I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not giving any financial advice there. But there is a lot happening in a way this week, and this video is to an extent a preview, and it's a preview of what I will be perhaps discussing over the coming week. Now, what I wanted to focus on in this video is Venus moving into Aquarius. So Venus has already moved into Aquarius. It moved into Aquarius on the weekend of the 7th and 8th. To be precise, Venus moved into Aquarius on... when did Venus move into Aquarius? Venus moved into Aquarius, as I'm talking about, I should have really known about it, but it moved into Aquarius, I think it moved into Aquarius on around the 7th. So 7th of December, that was last Saturday. Although I'm recording this on a Saturday, so I'm recording this on Saturday the 7th. So actually on the day of recording, Venus moves into Aquarius. So I suppose I'm doing this in terms of my weekly preview. I get messed up with time. So Saturday the 7th, Venus moves into Aquarius. It stays in Aquarius until the beginning of next year. So when does Venus leave Aquarius? Venus leaves Aquarius. I think Venus leaves Aquarius and goes into Pisces on, looks like around the 3rd of January. So we've got Venus in Aquarius for the next, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks even. And so what does it mean? And to what extent will we experience a change? Well, Venus has been moving through Capricorn, now moving through Aquarius. So Venus is moving from one Saturn-ruled sign to another. So in one sense, not a great deal changes. It's not like Venus moving from Aquarius to Pisces. That is a huge change. Or Venus, say, moving from Libra to Scorpio. This is more subtle. And both Capricorn and Aquarius in their own way can be quite aloof. Though Venus is a planet of aesthetics and what things look like. And you could say that Venus in Capricorn may be quite traditional, not wanting things to be too outlandish, whereas Venus in Aquarius might be more experimental and perhaps more independent-minded, not being so afraid of what impact one has. And when we're dealing with Venus in Aquarius, because it's a gendered planet, Venus and Mars are two. Venus is a female planet, Mars is a male planet, so it may impact males and females differently. A woman with Venus in Aquarius, well, that may be very much who she is. She may have a strong Aquarian streak to her. Whereas man with a Venus in Aquarius, perhaps that's what he's looking for in a woman. I mean, that is possible. So because in a male chart, Venus in Aquarius is more projectable. So there could be a slight sort of difference of emphasis there. Now, turning to some people who have Venus in Aquarius, the first person I want to look at is Alyssa Heinerscheid. So Alyssa Heinerscheid was famous, or perhaps infamous, for the Bud Light rebranding. So she was, I think, a vice president of marketing at Bud Light. I believe that she was heavily involved with this decision to use, what was his name? Her name, Dylan Mulvaney, to publicize Bud Light, because she thought it was time for Bud Light to sort of change its branding, but it was perhaps too associated with some male frat. That's a word they like to use in America, frat. I'm not quite sure what, very much that sort of male boisterousness, and it was time for a change of image, and so it would be a good idea to perhaps associate Bud Light with someone from the transgender community, like Dylan Mulvaney. Venus in Aquarius, that's a good idea, isn't it? That's interesting, revolutionary. And, of course, it didn't work. But I think here is Alyssa Heinerscheid's Venus in Aquarius. You can see perhaps why she might have wanted to have done that with Venus in Aquarius. It's her Venus. It's not being projected. She wants to show herself to be an individual, doing things differently. And she's actually got Moon in Aries as well. I mean, I don't have her time of birth, but at 6 Aries, I think it's almost certain that, her Moon is definitely in Aries. So Moon in Aries, female planet in a female chart. That's not going to be projected. Moon in Aries, she's quite a dynamic person. She likes to do things her way. Venus in Aquarius, she's a dynamic individual. So you can see from just by looking at Venus in Aquarius how she might have wanted to push that idea. Now, it didn't work out, and perhaps the problem is that her Venus was square Saturn and perhaps square Mars as well. So she has a Mars-Saturn square, which unfortunately her Venus crashed into. In fact, Venus is quite close, relatively close to the square of her Mars-Saturn midpoint. So you could say with Venus square Saturn in Aquarius, Venus square Saturn in Scorpio, her aesthetic judgment kind of messed things up. She thought she was being original. She thought that she was being perhaps a bit revolutionary, but it didn't work out, and it caused catastrophic damage to the company she was working for. And another woman with Venus in Aquarius is Kemi Badenoch. So Kemi Badenoch, again, I don't have her time of birth, but Kemi Badenoch is the leader of the British Conservative Party. She continues not to do well in terms of favourability ratings, but as I've discussed her chart before, I'm not convinced that she's going to be a disaster. I'm not convinced that she's never going to be Prime Minister. I think that there are real strengths to her chart, and I think that maybe she's the kind of person that the British will eventually vote for. I mean, I think if you're from Britain, and you're probably going to disagree with me at this stage, and you might feel that she has no chance of being Prime Minister. There's a lot of focus on how well Reform and Nigel Farage is doing, but a recent poll does indicate that of the main parties, her party is stable. I mean, it's doing best in the opinion polls. It's doing a little bit better than Reform. It's doing better than Labour, but it's early days. And there's not going to be an election in the UK for a long time. But she has Venus in Aquarius. And so with her Venus in Aquarius, she likes to do things her own way. She's, I suppose, quite independent-minded. And you might say that so far that's worked for her. She's got into politics. A woman in politics, a woman of colour in politics who's done very well, who I suppose in a way has been quite individual. She's also quite outspoken. And so it is early days with her Venus in Aquarius. So her Venus in Aquarius, though, is a little bit unaspected. Now, that is a technique in astrology which I don't use a great deal, but it's to ask, is how well integrated is a planet in the chart. And with Kemi Badenoch's Venus, there are no sort of oppositions squares involving that Venus. Okay, she's had Venus is square Chiron, but that's pretty minor. There's no trines, no sextiles. So that Venus is, I would have said, was unaspected. And so when you've got an unaspected planet, it's possible that planet can be very strong, or it can be not particularly well integrated. And one of the criticisms that people make of Kemi Badenoch is that she picks fights with people, that she's quite aggressive, that maybe she doesn't have the social skills that one might expect of a politician. And I suppose if you're a politician, you have to get on with lots of different people, and if you don't have those social skills, it can be difficult, or you may come over as being abrasive. But I suppose in her case, she's managed to get through the Conservative Party to the extent of being their leader, so she must have some social skills. But maybe in terms of looking at her ability to pick a fight, pick an argument, it may be that her Venus, which is rather unaspected, I would have said it was unaspected, not being particularly connected with the rest of her chart. Okay, I know she's got a very wide Venus sextile Neptune. With a sextile, I would not regard 6-7 degrees as a reasonable orb. That's too wide So I would have said that Venus was unaspected. Okay, you might find a minor aspect, Venus quincunx Mars, but even then it's not particularly close quincunx. And if you were to ask what does Venus quincunx Mars, well, that may say something about her abrasiveness. So that's Venus in Aquarius for Kemi Badenoch. And someone else, we have Baron Trump. Now, we don't know a lot about Baron Trump, although we're told, I don't know whether this is true or not, that he had a big role in his father's success. According to the story, it was his idea that his father be interviewed by Joe Rogan, and I think the general consensus seems to have been that that interview was a great success, made more successful by the fact that Kamala Harris's advisors told her not to go to be interviewed by Joe Rogan. Of course, the interview was free, unlike many of the celebrities that Kamala Harris had to pay for. So she passed on this free opportunity to get publicity. But anyway, apparently it was Baron Trump's idea for his father to be interviewed by Joe Rogan, because Baron Trump knows what works for young men. I think that's the narrative. That's what young men listen to, according to Baron Trump. And Venus in Aquarius, that may say something about his mother and how he sees his mother. And I suppose you could say that Melania has this sort of image of being somewhat aloof and maybe a little bit icy, perhaps. And I suppose you could say that is how Venus in Aquarius might work. His Venus is conjunct Neptune in Aquarius. This is kind of a rather interesting combination. I mean, it's not exactly conjunct Neptune, but that may say something about his how his Venus works. But also Venus trine Mars. And so Venus trine Mars, Venus in Aquarius trine Mars in Gemini. I would have said that people have said a lot of stuff about Baron Trump, and people have speculated about him, but just that Venus trine Mars may suggest that he has a certain charisma that we don't really know about yet. But we mustn't. He's only 18, so I think it's just important not to draw too many conclusions. But that Venus trine Mars does help him in terms of how he asserts himself, how he gets people onto his side, and it does give him a certain amount of charisma. Okay, it might not be obvious at the moment, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And the law. I mean, I don't think one normally would necessarily associate Venus in Aquarius with the law, but it's interesting that we have 3 present and former Supreme Court justices who have Venus in Aquarius. So we have Brett Kavanaugh, a Trump pick, has a Venus in Aquarius, and I don't know his time of birth, but Venus in Aquarius. I suppose it might be useful if you want to be a judge to have Venus in Aquarius, because it should give you a certain amount of objectivity, being able to see the facts of the case for what they really are. Though those on the left and progressives would argue that Brett Kavanaugh is not remotely objective. And I suppose with Brett Kavanaugh, there is this tension between his Sun in Aquarius and his Moon in Cancer. So Sun in Aquarius and his Aquarius planets do give him a certain amount of objectivity, allow him to distance himself from the emotions of a case, yet he's got the Moon in Cancer. So there are certain things he believes in, and maybe that Moon in Cancer does influence his beliefs. And in a sense, he's kind of reflecting something about the USA. The USA has the Sun in Cancer, but the Moon in Aquarius. So that is always an issue with the United States. that tension between objectivity and subjectivity, trying to give the impression, Moon in Aquarius, of being objective, let people do what they want, but then Sun in Aquarius, there is a strong set of beliefs underlying the country. And another Supreme Court justice is Samuel Alito. Samuel Alito has Sun in Aries, but also Venus in Aquarius. And you could say Venus conjunct Jupiter says something about the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court justice. Jupiter is about the law. Venus is conjunct Jupiter. And of course, in Samuel Alito's case, we do actually have a time of birth. So his midheaven is Venus. So midheaven is about his profession. He's got Venus in Aquarius conjunct Jupiter. So you could say the ruler of his profession conjunct Venus might indicate that law might be a good thing for him to pursue. Interestingly, he's got his Jupiter and Venus to an extent fairly close to, well, with Jupiter pretty much exact on America's moon, because the America on July the 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m, the moon was at around 27 Aquarius. So his Jupiter was on the United States' moon. So that shows a connection that he has with his country. And a final Supreme Court justice who is dead is Antonin Scalia. So Antonin Scalia, again, we have a time of birth. Interestingly, Antonin Scalia was born in Trenton, New Jersey, and so was Samuel Alito. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, but it's an interesting coincidence. And Antonin Scalia has had his Venus in Aquarius, and Venus in Aquarius, Moon in Scorpio. You know, you've got the Venus in Aquarius trying to be objective, but Moon in Scorpio, 3 degrees Scorpio, I would have said not remotely objective. And I think that Antonin Scalia, you know, people on the right, they sort of lionize him, but and a lot of people were grateful to him. I mean, it was Antonin Scalia's Supreme Court that made sure that George Bush won in 2000, and it eventually came down to the Supreme Court. But still, Venus in Aquarius, he can go through the motions of being objective, perhaps, and looking at things sort of beyond human emotion. But of course, those on the left would argue with that. I'm not really very familiar with the biographies of these Supreme Court justices, but as far as I know, maybe I'm prejudiced and I haven't looked at everything in enough detail. He seemed to be a judge who had very particular opinions, which of course coloured his judgment. And I suppose he would just say that he was an originalist interpretation of the Constitution. So you have 3 Supreme Court justices who, and in Antonin Scalia's case, had Venus in Aquarius. And Edward Teller had Venus in Aquarius. And Edward Teller is originally from Hungary, born in Budapest, and he was known as the father of the atomic bomb. And Venus in Aquarius, maybe there's a different side to Venus in Aquarius. I mean, I don't think that Venus in Aquarius necessarily has anything to do with him as the father of the atomic bomb. Though actually the reason I wanted to look at Edward Teller's chart is not really because he's got Venus in Aquarius, but I wanted to look at his chart because I just recently noticed that he had Sun conjunct Mercury combust. So we've just had Mercury combust, and sort of last Thursday there was a Sun conjunct Mercury, and I was trying to work out all the things that might mean. And one thing that Sun conjunct Mercury can mean is difficulty speaking, because Mercury is how you communicate, and the Sun can just overwhelm it. And there was an interview with Edward Teller, and he said that up until he was 3 years old, he couldn't talk. And, I think his family must have thought there was something wrong with him. And he talked about his memories, and he said he knew about numbers before he knew about words. And of course, by the time he hit adult life, he couldn't stop talking, and of course was very much in favour of America's nuclear deterrent and standing up against Russia, standing up against the dictators, I suppose, because, he'd come from Hungary, he'd experienced fascism, he'd experienced communism, he'd experienced anti-Semitism. So perhaps that would make sense. But that is a manifestation of Sun conjunct Mercury not being able to talk. For a time at least. Certainly he was a very late developer in the talking department. And then Hunter Biden had Sun conjunct Venus in Aquarius. Venus in Aquarius, it's a rather difficult Venus because of that Sun conjunct Venus. Because it's combust, and that may say something about his mother, the fact that his mother was killed in a car accident on December the 18th, 1972, as was his sister. So in that car accident, the two women in the car were killed, his mother and his sister. And so that could just represent Venus in Aquarius, conjunct the Sun. Obviously, Venus in Aquarius on its own doesn't indicate that kind of tragedy, but you throw the Sun in as well, it might well. So that might be how the combustion is working in his chart, and I suppose that it could be about his attitude to women. It could be about how he relates, and it may be about him finding it a bit difficult to relate, perhaps, and how his relationships with women in general have worked out. So a few more people, very quickly. Justin Trudeau, still going, isn't he? He's got Venus in Aquarius conjunct the North Node. Venus in Aquarius, again, may say something about his mother. Conjunct the North Node. That's nice, having Venus conjunct the North Node. Whatever you think of him, he's been able to navigate the political system extremely well. And he's been able to stay as Prime Minister as the Prime Minister of Canada for a long time. Okay, his political days might be numbered, but still he's done well. And Venus is in Aquarius. It's in fact involved in a grand trine. Venus in Aquarius, trine Saturn, trine Pluto, and of course you've got North Node involved in that. So Venus trine Pluto, it can be quite manipulative. Venus trine Saturn, he's able to create a kind of structure. He's able to maintain loyalties. Okay, that might be coming to an end, but I would have said he seems to be using that Venus in Aquarius quite well, and perhaps having a certain amount of distance and detachment, which in politics could perhaps be pretty useful. And anyone else? Princess Catherine. She's got Venus in Aquarius. She's got Venus square Jupiter in Aquarius. So her Venus in Aquarius, I suppose if you want to join the royal family, you do have to be a little bit aloof. You have to present yourself nicely and communicate in the right way. Venus conjunct Mercury. And it's square Jupiter, but Venus in Aquarius is able to keep control of things because of its aloofness. And in fact, her Venus in Aquarius is in mutual reception with Saturn. So her Saturn is at 21 Leo, and so Saturn is in Venus's sign. Venus is in Saturn's sign. So Venus in mutual reception to Saturn does strengthen her Venus, and it does give her a certain amount of control and poise, which I suppose serves her well. She also has Venus trine Mars, so Venus trine Mars does give attractiveness, and I suppose she was attractive enough to attract the attention of Prince William while they were at St Andrews University. So you could say that works well for her. but there have been pressures, which I don't think the Venus in Aquarius on its own is telling us about the kind of pressure she's under, though Venus square Jupiter, it's a very exact Venus square Jupiter, and I hesitate to suggest this, but given we know that she has had cancer, I have no idea what the state of her health is. If we'll say that she's got over it, I don't know. But you could say that Venus square Jupiter, after the fact, could indicate cancer, because Jupiter is about growth and it's Scorpio. Jupiter can be excessive growth. There is something a little excessive about that Jupiter square Venus. So maybe that Venus square Jupiter could say something about her disease, but we don't know much about what that disease is, and I'm rather hesitant to suggest that. And I must emphasize, if you have Jupiter making a hard aspect to Venus or another planet, it's not about cancer sort of in a general sense, but it's just given what we know about Princess Catherine. And I suppose let's finish on a final note. Stephen Hawking had Venus in Aquarius, and I suppose in terms of how he presented himself, Venus square Saturn, again, Venus square Saturn, we know that he had motor neurone disease. And so you might then say, because Venus square Saturn, at some level that may say something about the motor neurone disease. Motor neurone disease is obviously a disease which inhibits movement progressively, although he lived, I don't know, probably sort of pretty much, I think, for over half a century since with the disease, and he died in his 70s. So he died, his age, he didn't die particularly young. He lived a full life, but still, Venus square Saturn may indicate the disease or the progression of the disease, something inhibiting. Venus gets inhibited by Saturn, although that may say something about his various relationships. I think that his relationships weren't always smooth. I think he married, he had children, but I think he split up with his wife at a very late stage. I mean, I don't know the full details, but that could be how Venus square Saturn works. But Venus in Aquarius, he did like to do things his own way, and again, maybe that Venus square Saturn does say something about his health. One final person, Sam Bankman-Fried. People are talking about Sam Bankman-Fried again, I suppose, who caused such huge amount of damage to Bitcoin. Through FTX, and now, of course, Bitcoin, it's kind of hovering above and below 100,000, but he's in a federal prison. I suppose there's some question. Some people are asking whether or not he's any chance of him getting a reprieve from Biden. Who knows? That would be a very controversial thing to happen. But there is Sam Bankman-Fried's Venus in Aquarius. So Venus in Aquarius conjunct Saturn. I mean, Venus in Aquarius may, in a general sense, be about someone who has a certain ability to be objective and to look at things in a different way. And of course, I started off by looking at the chart of Alyssa Heinerscheid, who was sort of promoting, I would have said, a very woke agenda. And Sam Bankman-Fried was pretty woke in his own way. I mean, he was very progressive in his political opinions. Perhaps Venus conjunct Aquarius, giving the Democratic Party loads and loads of money. Money, of course, which had come from people who'd been ripped off by FTX, who thought he was buying Bitcoin and other cryptos, but he wasn't. And his actions, Venus conjunct Saturn, they did go a long way towards stopping the Bitcoin rally in 2021, because you thought there was going to be extra demand for people buying Bitcoin, but that money wasn't actually being used to buy Bitcoin. It was just being used for other stuff. So he has Venus in Aquarius. So that's the astrology. and I want to finish up by looking at the week ahead from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So this I Ching reading only applies to those of you who are actually going to watch the I Ching section. So if you don't watch the I Ching section, it doesn't apply to you. So if you don't want your I Ching read, you can stop watching the video now. So this reading is going to have 4 sections. It's going to have a general section. Then I'm going to look at money, then career, and finally relationships. And yeah, so it applies just for this week. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday, December the 9th, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 19, which is approach. And this hexagram is very much about our influence and how we can relate to other people and how seriously we are taken. And we can associate this hexagram with influence and leadership. And it has 2 moving lines. And so the bottom line moves and the 4th line from the bottom moves. So with that first line moving, it does indicate that as the week gets underway, we are indeed going to start having an influence, and we can start to make some kind of a move. We don't have to be dramatic about it. In fact, we shouldn't be dramatic about it, because it is the bottom line moving. It's very much at the beginning. And so when you've got the bottom line moving, it may also say something about our position or our relative position. We may come from a fairly lowly place, but it's okay. People will start to take us seriously, and our influence will grow, and we will slowly start to have an impact. And then we move to the 4th line from the bottom, and at this stage we really can be more forthcoming. And okay, we don't want to take it too far. We're certainly quite enthusiastic, but we've got to be sensible, and we've got to sort of know our limitations. But it does seem that people are taking us seriously, and so if you are trying to make an impression, trying to get noticed, or just you've perhaps got something to say that it's important to you, now is the time to start to make things happen, because I think that you're in a position where I think you will be taken seriously. Now we've got 2 lines moving, and that means that we move to a separate, different hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram 40, which is deliverance. Now it may be that at some stage, as we start to gain influence, as we start to be taken seriously, that we start to get into a situation where we understand what's happening, and we realize that something needs to be done. And deliverance is good because we are delivered from something, but there's still a something, isn't there? And the advice with deliverance is that you kind of got to quit the scene. You are delivered from a danger. Now, if you don't take the advice and you just stay where you are, that moment of deliverance, that window for deliverance will start to end. And so there is this recommendation with deliverance that you retreat. And so it's about having a position of influence. We see this growing with 19, and it reaches a point where people listen to what we're saying and can be taken seriously. And then perhaps we may reach a point where we need to give some advice, or we may just understand something, and then we have to get out before it's too late. But deliverance, absolutely. Don't worry about it. If you look at the signs of the times, you'll know when the time to leave is. You'll know when you've gone too far and when it's time to just get out. So that's the general picture. Now, as far as money is concerned, with money, if you've got ideas about money, thoughts about money, worries about money, then I think it's actually okay to talk about them. You know, maybe in the past people haven't wanted to discuss money. Money is just it's just hard work. You know, why bother? But you're kind of feeling perhaps that something needs to be brought out into the open, and maybe recently people were not very sympathetic to your message. But now when you start to talk about money and your concerns about money, people are increasingly prepared to listen. And if you have ideas about money, I think there's a good chance that those ideas will seem acceptable. So if you haven't got your way recently on some financial matter, perhaps the advice here is to keep going, keep trying to push your message. You might start from a position where in a position where you feel somewhat disadvantaged, but just keep moving and keep saying what's on your mind. Don't be too fast. Don't feel that you have to have an argument about it, but just keep going. And I think that people will, in the end, listen to you, and they'll accept that you perhaps have got it right. And we have a moving hexagram here, so this moves to hexagram number 40, and which is deliverance. And this indicates to me that you're aware that something of a financial nature is not necessarily going well, or it has distinct dangers, and maybe you're starting to work with something you're involved with. You're able to talk about it. People are starting to listen to you, and it's just that you're pointing out something that could go wrong, and by the end of a week there may be an opportunity to get out. Just usual warning, I'm not giving any financial advice here. This video is purely for entertainment purposes, but there is a sense of needing to retreat from something. Maybe it's about retreating from a commitment, or something you're involved with financially is just not working out and it's just time to get out. And maybe you can persuade other people that this is a dangerous situation. So perhaps if you and other people are involved, or it might be your family, for example, other people are involved in something financially and it's not working out, and you've talked about it, and now everyone gets it, and there is a chance, but it's only a chance. That window for deliverance is not going to be open forever. And then there is career and business, and the first hexagram we get is approach. So if you're working, then this week I think that you will be taken increasingly seriously. Even if you're working in a job where your position is quite lowly, you can still be heard. People will listen to you, and your ideas will be listened to, and your suggestions. So don't think that you are entirely powerless. Whatever your position, you can have an impact, and your way of looking at things is in many respects correct. And so in terms of your employers or the people you're working with, it's important not to hold back. People do need to hear what you've got to say, but it's not necessarily just about saying what's on your mind. It's also about the example you give. I think you can show a good example. You can almost sort of be a role model, and your behavior will be correct. And because of that, it's more likely that you'll be taken seriously, and you'll perhaps be given a position of trust, because it is 19. It is approach. But, with approach, we do get this idea that, in the end, things aren't going to last forever, that however good things are, they could go wrong. And I think that you kind of see this. There is a sense of the future. It might not be just you working for someone else. It might be a business. Things are working well. You're able to be listened to, but you're also becoming aware that not everything is fine, and that things do have to be changed, and you have a good idea about how things should be changed. And this leads to a second hexagram, which is deliverance. So if you're working, or if you have your own business, a dangerous situation is starting to manifest, and it's becoming clear. And maybe, I suppose, by the end of the week we've got a full moon. Something is becoming obvious, but there is a chance here to resolve it, to get out, to quit while you're ahead. And you can see it. You can see the way things are shaping up. So if, in terms of career and business, you're in a difficult situation, you feel, and perhaps over the week you're starting to feel that you're in a difficult situation, but it's a situation you understand, and it's something you can talk about it. Then, by the end of the week, perhaps as we start moving towards this full moon, you have a chance to end it, to deliver yourself from this situation. And I know it's moving towards Christmas, so perhaps things are slowing down a bit, but there's still work to be done here, and it's sort of your timely intervention, or perhaps a timely display of leadership, can make all the difference. And finally, there is relationships. So approach is a very relationship hexagram. It is talking about getting closer to someone. And, we're talking about all kinds of relationships here. And it means that a lot of relationships, I think, are getting closer. I mean, it's quite subtle, but it does seem that there's less and less distance. And if there's someone you want to be involved with, or you want to talk to, or you want to interact with, then 19 approach, and particularly at the beginning of the week, you can perhaps start to make some kind of gradual move. And even if you're dealing with someone who appears to be sort of difficult to approach, unapproachable, you can to an extent break the ice, and you can perhaps even sort of take the initiative here. And so there is going to be sort of slow, gradual success. So I think at the beginning of the week, relationships should improve across the board, and you're just going to be helped by the fact that people are going to take you more seriously, because this hexagram, 19, can be connected with leadership, and it's your influence. And it may even be that you don't necessarily have to do anything. It's just the power of your personality, your influence, you as a role model, you as someone who's setting an example, that does attract people your way. And so that is good. We do have two moving lines. This does mean that this hexagram 19 does move to a different hexagram, and so that moves to hexagram 40, which is deliverance. Now, this could mean several things. It may be that you start at the beginning of a week, you start getting closer to someone, and it's working well. You're starting to understand this person, and then at a certain point, you maybe have second thoughts. And you start to think, well, hold on, we don't really want to get any closer than we are already. And so deliverance, delivering yourself from a perhaps somewhat dangerous situation. So if you find towards the end of a week that you're in a relationship and you don't want to be in that relationship, then you can be delivered from it. I mean, I suppose I'm not necessarily talking about any kind of relationship that is sort of long-lasting, but more a relationship perhaps that develops over the course of a week, or perhaps has already been developing, something relatively short-term, then deliverance may be a realization that this relationship is not working out. But it could be, if we're talking about something longer lasting, this deliverance may relate to where a relationship is going and the dynamics of a relationship. And so it could be that a relationship in some ways could be saved. So you might see it in a different way. So you might say you start the week with a relationship that is not working well. Approach represents you taking control of the situation, starting to have an influence on another person, and as a result of your influence, and you are listened to, and because of that, the other person responds to you, and a relationship can be salvaged, hence deliverance. You understand why the relationship could go wrong, and you understand that it could go wrong very soon, very quickly, but you make the right move, you make the right decision, and you are able to move away from a precipice. So that is another way of looking at it. And it may also be that you, in combination with other people, can take action to save yourselves from a difficult situation, or perhaps a catastrophic situation, which may not in itself be about relationships. It may be that you as a group are involved with something and there's a danger, and together as a group, perhaps with your leadership, you can steer things in the right direction and avoid something very unfortunate. And that's it. And it's a short video, but that's how I see the week. But this video is very much a preview, and of course, in terms of the astrology or some of the astrological events I've talked about earlier in the video, I will be discussing them over the course of the next week in much greater detail. So thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Anyway, I will talk to you again very soon.